Since the first title update of Monster Hunter Wilds, we've been given brand new weapons and armor, most notably from the game's low-rank story returning final boss, Zoshia. Along with its gear, the title update also introduced nerfs to the Corrupted Mantle, which has reduced its damage and duration, but the most impactful change to it is the nerf to its affinity, going from 30% to just 10%. Therefore, in this build video, we'll be covering builds that can reach as close to 80 or 100% affinity as possible to account for Corrupted Mantle's downtime during longer hunts. Before we get into the actual builds, let's talk about the new Zoshia's Charge Blade. With true raw display settings enabled, this Charge Blade sits at 220 base raw, 200 Dragon Element, 5% affinity, 50 hits of white, and level 3, 2, and 1 deco slots. In comparison, an Artian Charge Blade with 3 attack infusions and a god roll of 4 attack boosts and 1 sharpness boost gives it 225 raw, 50 hits of white sharpness, and 5% affinity, along with any status of your choice and triple level 3 deco slots. In terms of stats wise, the Zoshia CB can be a decent alternative for those who aren't as lucky with their Artian rolls, even though the Artian CB grants more utility with its deco slots and status effects. However, what makes the Zoshia CB stand out compared to its Artian counterpart is its unique weapon skill, White Flame Torrent. How this skill works is by approximately every 3 to 4 hits and a cooldown timer of 6 seconds, the weapon will deal a 50 true raw damage explosion when you hit a monster. This skill can also be further amplified by the Rathalos armor skill, Scorcher, which adds additional fire damage that scales with a monster's fire weakness. This means that in longer fights and monsters that are weak to dragon or fire, the Zoshia CB can potentially outdamage the Artian CB, especially if you don't have perfect reinforcement rules. If you're hitting a monster nearly every 6 seconds or so, which CB's Savage Axe does especially well, you'll be dealing a 500 damage per minute regardless if you're in sword or axe mode. That being said, the Artian CB still offers more utility with its deco slots, status effects, and is still probably better in shorter hunts. Being able to KO a monster, then paralyze it and KO it again just makes the Para Artian CB absurdly broken in this game. Another CB that can compete with the Artians and Zoshia for raw damage would be the Guardian Rathalos CB. This weapon comes with 220 base raw, 15% affinity, 20 hits of white sharpness, and 250 fire, along with built-in Master's Touch, and 1 level of critical element. Its higher affinity makes it easier to build sets around and edges out against fire-weak monsters. So far, these are the best raw damage options in the game, and Artian weapons outclass most elemental options. But wait a minute, what about the new Mizutsune CB with its new skill, Slicked Blade, and the 4-piece Mizu set bonus? Surely it's good, right? Unfortunately, with its stats and having to use 4 pieces of Mizu to activate its weapon skill, the Mizu CB loses out to the Zoshia and Artian CBs because most of their builds reach high affinity without using 4 pieces of Mizu, and the other CBs have higher base raw, have better utility and deal more damage overall. Even as a water element option, the issue with Mizu CB is that it's an impact file CB as well, whereas the Artian water CB is an elemental file and reaches higher stats across the board. It's still a cool looking weapon though, and if you just care about the aesthetics, then it's not a terrible choice of a weapon either. It's not like you're playing with a rarity 1 bone weapon of all things. So feel free to pick it up and play however you like. So now that we've explained the weapons, let's move on to the builds. The first build we have is an armor set that needs no further introduction. It's the 4-piece gore set with Zoshia's chest. With Agitator 5, Maximize 3, and Weakness Exploit 2, you'll reach a meager 60% affinity at first, but once you've cured the frenzy virus that you're afflicted by, the Gormagala set bonus, and 3 levels of antivirus by attacking a monster, you'll gain 25% affinity and 15 raw. This grants the set 85% affinity when not accounting for any Artian rolls or expert decos. And if you use the Corrupted Mantle, you'll have 95% affinity from the mantle. This set is strong against plenty of matchups and can quickly burst down monsters in shorter hunts. The downside to this build though is that it lacks a fair bit of affinity for longer fights once Corrupted Mantle does run out. So if you're using an Artian CB, we'd recommend using an Expert 3 deco for 12% more affinity to be more consistent, reaching a total of 97% affinity.
So now you might be thinking, it seems like the 4-piece gore is the undisputed strongest build.
and it was for the longest time during the title update 1. That is, until Arch-Tempered Rey Dau was added to the game. The Rey Dau Gamma armor pieces that you'll be looking to make will be the head, arms, and waist pieces, paired with Gore Magala chest and legs. The reason why we're playing these 3 pieces is because of their skill efficiency and the new set bonus Lord's Soul. What Lord's Soul does is that it gives you the skill Guts, which prevents you from fainting after taking lethal damage above a set threshold. And whilst Guts hasn't been activated, Lord's Soul grants you a 5% more raw attack. Compared to the 4-piece Gore set bonus, what gives the Rey Dau Gamma set the lead is that it comes with another skill, and that's Latent Power level 2. There are 2 ways you can activate Latent Power. Either it will activate after 2 minutes of combat automatically, or you can activate it faster by taking 130 damage to your health. Once Latent Power activated, you will be getting 20% affinity for 2 minutes, but then because of the 2-piece set bonus Thunderous Roar, you can increase this duration to 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Like this, while Latent Power is active, you can reach 100% affinity, even without an Expert 3 jewel. So this means you can play either an Attack 3 jewel or other useful jewels of your choosing. Therefore, with Latent Power active and Attack 3 jewel slotted in, this gives the Rey Dau Gamma build an around 6 to 7% damage increase over 4-piece Gore. Oh well, at least the armor is worth farming for, am I right? Well, apart from the damage increase, the set also comes with a Vedic Center level 2, which is pretty comfy. And Guts is a really handy skill for tough fights as well, so for most situations where you can get Latent Power frequently, this probably is the strongest build for comfy hunting, and even for some speedrun scenarios too. It does lose out to 4-piece Gore if Guts has activated, and you lose the raw damage increase bonus from that, and also when you cannot get Latent Power to activate consistently. So keep in mind, it still is kinda situational. The next build we have here is a mixed set of Gore Magala and Jindahat's pieces with the new Zochia chest. Just from 2 pieces of Gore, you'll still be able to gain 25% affinity once the frenzy is cured, and in tandem with Weakness Exploit 5, Agitator 5, and Max Mind 3 in this build, you'll reach 95% affinity from the armor set. However, with the 4-piece Gore, you won't gain the additional 15 raw damage bonus. So what's so good about this set, you may ask? Well, it's thanks to the Jindahat set bonus Binding Counter. If you've watched our Gunlance build video, you're probably already familiar with this skill, but for those who don't know, what this skill does is grant you a 25 raw damage after you've recovered from a power clash, pinned, webbed, or frostbite status at 2 pieces for 1 minute. In comparison to the 4-piece Gore build, this leads to a 10 raw damage lead once Binding Counter is activated, and it has higher affinity without Corrupted Mantle. So this build has a noticeable edge compared to 4-piece Gore in certain matchups, especially against monsters that you can get consistently a power clashes or escape pins such as Arcveld, or also escape statuses that bind you. Now for a build for those who want to take full advantage of White Flame Torrent. This is a build that uses 4-piece of Guardian Rathalos and Soshia's chest. The 4-piece of Guardian Rathalos grants you the armor set bonus Scorcher, which adds additional fire damage that can also boost the damage of your White Flame Torrent explosions depending on how weak the monster is to fire. For example, here in these clips, HC is hitting the training dummy without Scorcher and is getting the usual 50 damage per proc. And now with the Scorcher set bonus, it increased the damage from 50 to a whopping 104 per explosion. Considering that the training dummy has a 30 elemental hit zone for all elements, this means you gain double the damage of White Flame Torrent explosions on monsters that are weak to fire. However, doesn't this mean that the build is only good against fire-weak monsters? No, not necessarily. In this clip, HC is fighting a Mizu, which only has an average of 5 to 10 fire hit zone value, but the explosions are still doing 80 damage per proc. That's still a 60% damage increase to the explosions on a monster that isn't even weak to fire. And that sounds pretty amazing. Well, the issue with this build is that the Guardian Rathalos armor only gives you at most 75% affinity and makes you lose a level of Agitator and Burst compared to the other builds. That's about a loss of 12 raw and 5% affinity, and it has to compete with the affinity and raw gain from the Gore Magala set bonus, so it does lose out, unfortunately. Even if you were to make a mix set of 2-piece Guardian Rathalos and 2-piece Gore, it ends up losing out to other options too. That being said, the increased damage from White Flame explosions could still be be great for players who aren't used to playing aggressively and keeping up with the monster's moves, because the White Flame procs can be activated by the Charge Blade's faster and lower commitment moves in Sword mode, and not just the heavier and slower Axe mode attacks that can leave you vulnerable. And the longer the hunt goes, the more explosions you'll get, and it's just free damage. We'd recommend having a hunting horn that either gives you affinity or attack with its song buffs as a secondary weapon to make up for this build's shortcomings. On to the next build. I'm sure by now you're probably wondering, hey, what about SAED and elemental builds? Well, here it is. A mix set of 2-piece Gore, 2-piece Soshia, and Arcwell chest. Thanks to the new Soshia armor, we've actually gotten a pretty massive buff to elemental builds because of how good the Soshia arms and waist are. This build reaches 95% affinity and has all you need for elemental files, such as Coalescence 3 that grants you a massive 30% elemental damage increase, and we pair this with 2 pieces of Gore Magala and 3 levels of antivirus, so once the frenzy is cured, you'll gain the benefits of Coalescence. There's also 2 levels of elemental absorption from the arms and 1 level of burst that you can slot in any of the level 3 decos, so you can push your element even further. Thanks to this build, high affinity and element, instead of just playing only SAED or Power X playstyle, you can actually easily play a hybrid playstyle or switch between the two. For weapon decorations, we'd recommend combinations of magazine level 2, focus 3 and any sort of level 3 elemental jewel, or you can swap the magazine or focus jewels to fit in critical boost 3 to 5 if you want to focus more on the Power X playstyle. That being said, if you want to purely focus on either the Power Axe or SAED playstyles instead, you can just play a 4-piece Gore build or the old SAED build that was featured in this Charge Blade Duo speedrun Yin and HC did in the previous update. And finally, we've reached the last build on our list, a Heroics 5 set for speedrunning. Although there are different variations of Heroic sets, so far this is the one with the highest affinity using an RTN CB with an Expert 3 decoration, reaching 92% affinity. How the Heroics skill at level 5 works is that when a player is below 35% of their health, they gain 30% more attack. Apart from getting hit by the monster, you can activate the skill by equipping the Corrupted Mantle and bombing yourself until your health drains below the threshold. Also, as a side bonus, it comes with 2 pieces of Fulgur that helps keep maximum might at full uptime. This is one of the hardest hitting builds by far, but it's also really risky to use and is mostly just used for speedruns. However, it does come with all the necessary skills that you need and can be readjusted to your needs. And there you have it, that was the script written by HC for you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and we'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.